Chapter 13, Public Finance, Part 1, Principles of Public Finance. Principles of Public Finance, 236(1). The following principles shall guide the government and all public institutions, including persons dealing with the government and such public institutions, in order to ensure the proper management of the public finance system in the Gambia. A. All aspects of public financial management shall be based on transparency, accountability, and public participation. B. The public finance system shall be directed towards the development of the Gambia, and in particular, 1. The burden of taxation shall be applied fairly and equitably. 2. The revenue sources for the government and the local government authorities shall be clearly defined and the revenue raised in accordance with law. 3. All expenditure shall be directed towards the development of the Gambia, and special provision shall be made for marginalized groups and disadvantaged areas. C. The burdens and benefits of the use of resources shall be shared equitably between present and future generations. D. Public funds shall be expended transparently, prudently, economically, efficiently, and effectively. E. Public financial management shall be conducted responsibly, and fiscal reporting shall be clear and transparent. And F. Public borrowing and all transactions involving the public debt shall be carried out transparently and in the best interests of the Gambia. 2. No taxes shall be levied except A. Under the specific authority of this Constitution or an act of the National Assembly, and B. After due consultation with the relevant stakeholders, including the general public. Government financial support to local government authorities. 237(1). Subject to this Constitution, the government shall, from revenues raised by it in each year, provide additional funding to local government authorities in such percentage as may be provided in an act of the National Assembly. 2. The following criteria shall be taken into account in determining the additional funding to be made by the government to local government authorities. A. The national interest. B. Any provision to be made in respect of the public debt and other national obligations. C. The needs of the government determined by objective criteria. D. The need to ensure that local government authorities are able to perform their functions efficiently and effectively. D. The fiscal capacity and efficiency of local government authorities. F. The developmental and other needs of local government areas. G. The economic disparities within and among local government areas and the need to remedy them. H. The need for affirmative action in respect of marginalized groups and disadvantaged areas. I. The need for local government authorities to harness their potential and optimize their capacity to raise revenue. J. The desirability of stable and predictable allocation of funding to local government authorities. And K. The need for flexibility in responding to emergencies and other temporary needs based on similar objective criteria. Part 2. Taxation. Taxation 238(1). No taxation shall be imposed, waived, or varied except by or under the authority of this Constitution or an Act of the National Assembly. 2. An Act of the National Assembly may make provision a. For the collection of taxes proposed to be imposed or altered in a bill which has been presented to the National Assembly during a period of 4 months from the date of presentation, or such longer period as may be specified in a resolution passed by the National Assembly after the bill has been presented. Or b. For any local government authority established by law to impose taxation within the area for which such authority is established, and to alter such taxation, but no provision shall include power to waive any tax due. 3. Where any law confers power on any person or authority to waive or vary a tax imposed by any law, the exercise of that power of any person or authority shall be subject to the approval of the National Assembly. 4. Where an act of the National Assembly permits the waiver or variation of any tax or other charges, a public record of each waiver or variation shall be maintained together with the reason for the waiver or variation, and b. Each waiver or variation and the reason for it shall be reported to the National Assembly and the Auditor General. 5. Where any person or authority exercises the power to waive or vary a tax or other charges imposed under any law, the person or authority shall publish the waiver or variation in the Gazette. 6. A public officer may not be exempted from payment of tax by reason of the office held or the nature of the work of the public officer. Part 3. Public Funds. Consolidated Revenue Fund. 239. 1. There shall be a consolidated revenue fund into which shall be paid a. All revenues or other money raised or received for the purposes of or on behalf of the government, and b. Any other money raised or received in trust for or on behalf of the government. 2. Notwithstanding subsection 1, an Act of the National Assembly may provide a. For the payment of particular revenue or other money into some other fund established for a specific purpose, and b. For the retention of revenue or other money by the Department of Government that received it for the purpose of defraying the expenses of that department. Withdrawals from Consolidated Revenue Fund and other funds. 241. No money shall be withdrawn from the Consolidated Revenue Fund except a. To meet expenditure charged on that fund by this Constitution or an Act of the National Assembly, or b. Where the issue of that money has been authorized by an Appropriation Act, a Supplementary Appropriation Act, or in accordance with Section 249(1). 2. No money shall be withdrawn from any other public fund of the Gambia unless the issue of that money has been authorized by law. 3. Where money is charged on the Consolidated Revenue Fund or any other public fund by law, it shall be paid out of that fund to the person or authority to whom it is due. Contingencies Fund. 241. 1. An Act of the National Assembly may make provision for the establishment of a Contingencies Fund and for authorizing the Minister responsible for finance, subject to subsection 2, to make advances from that fund if he or she is satisfied that there has arisen an unforeseen and urgent need for expenditure for which no other provision exists. 2. The minister responsible for finance shall not authorize any expenditure from the Contingencies Fund in excess of 1% of the estimates approved by the National Assembly for the current year before he or she has caused a supplementary estimate in respect of such excess expenditure to be presented to the Assembly. 3. Where any advance is made from the Contingencies Fund, a supplementary estimate shall be presented and a supplementary appropriation bill shall be introduced for the purpose of replacing the amount so advanced within 90 days of the advance being made. Development Fund 242.1. There is established a development fund into which shall be paid 5% of all the revenue collected by the government each year, calculated on the basis of the most recent audited accounts of revenue received as approved by the National Assembly. 2. The government shall use the development fund only to provide basic services including water, roads, health facilities and electricity to marginalized groups and disadvantaged areas to the extent necessary to bring the quality of services with respect to those groups and areas to the level generally enjoyed by the rest of the nation so far as possible. 3. The government may use the development fund, A, only to the extent that the expenditure of those funds has been approved in an appropriation bill enacted by the National Assembly, and B, either directly or indirectly through conditional grants to local government authorities in which marginalized groups and disadvantaged areas exist. 4. Any unexpected money in the development fund at the end of a particular financial year shall remain in that fund for use in accordance with subsections 2 and 3 during any subsequent financial year. Salaries charged on the Consolidated Revenue Fund 243.1. The salaries and allowances and the retirement benefits of the holders of office to which this section applies shall be charged on the Consolidated Revenue Fund. 2. This section applies to the offices of A, the President and the Vice President, B, the Speaker, C, a judge of a superior court, D, a member of the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission, E, the Auditor General, F, the Ombudsperson, G, the National Human Rights Commissioners, H, the Anti-Corruption Commissioners, and I, the Director of Public Prosecutions. Accountability 244.1. The accounting officer in charge of a ministry or department shall be accountable to the National Assembly for the funds in that ministry or department. 2. Any person holding a political or public office who directs or concurs in the use of public funds contrary to any law or existing instructions shall be accountable for any loss arising from that use and shall be required to make good the loss, even if he or she has ceased to hold that office. 3. The National Assembly shall monitor all expenditure of public funds. Part 4. Loans, grants, government guarantees and public debts. Loans 245.1. The National Assembly may by resolution supported by the votes of not less than 1/2 of all members authorize the government to enter into an agreement for the granting of a loan out of any public fund or public account. 2. An agreement to which subsection 1 refers shall be laid before the National Assembly and shall not come into effect until it is approved by not less than 1/2 of all members of the Assembly. 3. No loan shall be raised by the government on behalf of itself or any other person or authority otherwise than by or under the authority of an Act of the National Assembly. 4. An Act of the National Assembly authorizing the raising of a loan shall provide a. That the terms and conditions of a loan shall be laid before the National Assembly and that the loan agreement shall not come into operation until it has been approved by the Assembly, and b. That any money received in respect of a loan shall be paid into the Consolidated Revenue Fund or some other public fund as may be authorized by an Act of the National Assembly. 5. An Act of the National Assembly may provide for the application of this section with any necessary modifications to a. Any guarantee by the government, or b. An international business or economic transaction to which the government proposes to become a party. 6. The minister responsible for finance shall, at such times as the National Assembly may require, present to the National Assembly such information as he or she may have relating to a. The granting of loans, their servicing and repayment, and b. The payment into the Consolidated Revenue Fund or other public fund as may be authorized by an Act of the National Assembly of money derived from loans raised from institutions outside the Gambia. Limits of state borrowings, public debts, and state guarantees. 246. 1. An Act of the National Assembly shall set limits on a. Borrowings by the state, b. The public debt, and c. Debts and obligations whose payment or repayment is guaranteed by the state. 2. Any limits set by an Act of the National Assembly under subsection 1 shall not be exceeded without the authority of the Assembly. 3. An Act of the National Assembly shall prescribe terms and conditions under which the government may guarantee loans. 4. Within 60 days after the government has concluded a loan agreement or guarantee, the minister responsible for finance shall cause its terms to be published in the Gazette. 5. The minister responsible for finance shall a. At least twice a year report to the National Assembly on the performance of loans raised or guaranteed by the government, and b. At the same time as the estimates of revenue and expenditure are laid before the National Assembly under Section 248, present to the Assembly a comprehensive statement of the public debt of the Gambia. The public debt. 247. 1. The public debt of the Gambia shall be a charge on the Consolidated Revenue Fund and such other public fund as may be authorized by an Act of the National Assembly. 2. For the purposes of this section, the public debt includes interest on the debt, sinking fund payments and redemption money in respect of that debt, and all costs, charges, and expenses incidental to the management and repayment of that debt. Part 5. Budget. Annual Estimates and Appropriation Bill. 248. 1. The President shall cause the Minister responsible for finance to prepare and lay before the National Assembly at least 60 days before the end of the financial year estimates of the revenue and expenditure of the Gambia for the following financial year. 2. The estimates shall include any estimates which, under this Constitution, are to be submitted directly to the President by any person or authority for presentation by the President to the National Assembly. 3. Any person or authority that is entitled to draw up its own estimates for presentation, a. by the President to the National Assembly, shall provide the President with such estimates at least 90 days before the end of the financial year, or b. directly to the National Assembly, such estimates shall be provided to the National Assembly at least 90 days before the end of the financial year. 4. Before the National Assembly considers the estimates of revenue and expenditure, a committee of the Assembly shall discuss and review the estimates and make recommendations to the Assembly. 5. In discussing and reviewing the estimates, the committee shall seek representations from the public, and the recommendations shall be taken into account when the committee makes its recommendations to the National Assembly. 6. When the estimates of expenditure have been approved by the National Assembly, an appropriation bill shall be introduced into the National Assembly to authorize the withdrawal from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the money needed for the expenditure and for the appropriation of that money for the purposes mentioned in the bill. 7. The appropriation bill mentioned in subsection 6 shall not include expenditure that is charged on the Consolidated Revenue Fund by this Constitution or an Act of the National Assembly. 8. In addition to presenting the estimates for the following financial year, the President may cause to be prepared and presented to the National Assembly a. Fiscal and monetary programs and plans for economic and social development covering periods exceeding 1 year, and b. Estimates of revenue and expenditure in respect of such programs and plans. Expenditure before annual budget is passed. 249. 1. If the appropriation bill in respect of any financial year has not been passed into law by the beginning of that financial year, the President may authorize the withdrawal of money from the Consolidated Revenue Fund for the purposes of meeting expenditure necessary to carry on the services of the government for a period not exceeding 4 months from the beginning of the financial year. 2. The withdrawal of funds in accordance with subsection 1 shall not exceed 1/3 of the sums authorized for the relevant services by the Appropriation Act for the immediately preceding financial year. Supplementary appropriation 251. Subject to section 241, if in respect of any financial year it is found that the amount appropriated under the Appropriation Act is insufficient, or that a need has arisen for a purpose for which no amount has been appropriated by that Act, a supplementary estimate showing the sums required shall be laid before the National Assembly before the expenditure can be incurred. 2. Where a supplementary estimate has been approved by the National Assembly, a supplementary appropriation bill shall be introduced into the National Assembly for the appropriation of the sums so approved. Part 6. Public Procurement. Public Procurement 251. 1. When a state organ, statutory body, or state-owned enterprise or any other public entity contracts for goods or services, it shall do so in accordance with a system that is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. 2. An Act of the National Assembly shall prescribe a framework within which policies relating to procurement and asset disposal shall be implemented, and may provide for all or any of the following: a. Categories of preference in the allocation of contracts. b. The protection or advancement of persons, categories of persons, or groups previously disadvantaged by unfair competition or discrimination. c. Sanctions against contractors that have not performed according to professionally regulated procedures, contractual agreements, or laws. And d. Sanctions against persons who have defaulted on their tax obligations or have been guilty of corrupt practices or serious violations of fair employment laws and practices. Chapter 14. Land, Natural Resources, and the Environment. Part 1. Principles of equitable use of land, environment, and natural resources. Principles of land, environment, and natural resources. 252. 1. Land, environment, and natural resources in the Gambia shall be held, used, and managed in a manner that is equitable, efficient, productive, and sustainable, and in accordance with the following principles: a. Equitable access and security of land rights. b. Transparent and cost-effective administration of land. c. sustainable exploitation, utilization, productive management and conservation of the environment, land, and natural resources, and the equitable sharing of the accruing benefits. D. Protection, conservation, preservation, and sustainable use of land, environment, and natural resources for the benefit of present and future generations. E. Protection of genetic resources and biological diversity. F. Establishment of systems of environmental impact assessment, environmental audit, and monitoring of the environment. G. Recognition of the adverse effects of climate change on the sustainable use of land, environment, and natural resources, and the need to build resilience and increase adaptation to these effects. H. Protection and enhancement of intellectual property in and indigenous knowledge of biodiversity and the genetic resources of the communities. I. Sound conservation and protection of ecologically sensitive areas. J. Public participation in the management, protection, and conservation of land, environment, and natural resources. K. Elimination of discrimination in law, customs, and practices related to land and property in land based on gender. L. Encouragement of communities to settle land disputes through recognized local community initiatives consistent with this Constitution and other laws. And M. Utilization of the land, environment, and natural resources for the benefit of the people of the Gambia. 2. These principles shall be implemented through a national land, environment, and natural resources policy developed and reviewed regularly by the government and through acts of the National Assembly. 3. Every person has a responsibility to cooperate with state organs and other persons to protect and conserve the environment and ensure ecologically sustainable development and use of natural resources. Part 2. Land, Environment and Natural Resources Commission. Establishment and composition of the Commission. 253. 1. There is established the Land, Environment and Natural Resources Commission. 2. The Commission shall comprise the following persons who shall be appointed by the President, subject to confirmation by the National Assembly. A. A person who is or is qualified to be appointed as a judge of the Supreme Court, in brackets, in addition to the qualifications set out in Section 255. B. A legal practitioner of not less than 10 years standing. C. A person with qualifications in a field of study and not less than 10 years experience in land administration, planning, and survey. D. A person with qualification in a field of study and not less than 10 years experience in natural resources management. And E. A person with qualification in a field of study and not less than 10 years experience in environmental management. Powers and functions of the Commission. 254. An Act of the National Assembly shall provide for the powers and functions of the Commission, which shall include the power to A. Advise on the management of public land and natural resources. B. Recommend and from time to time review a national land, environment, and natural resources policy to the government. C. Advise the government on a comprehensive program for the registration of title in land throughout the Gambia. D. Commission research related to land, environment, and the use of natural resources and make recommendations to appropriate authorities. E. Initiate investigations on its own initiative or on a complaint into land disputes and issue such orders as it considers appropriate, including making recommendations for redress where appropriate. F. Encourage the application of traditional dispute resolution mechanisms in land conflicts. And G. monitor and have oversight responsibilities over land use planning throughout the country. Qualifications, disqualifications, and removal from office. 255. 1. A person qualifies to be appointed as a member of the Commission if he or she satisfies the qualifications set out in Section 215. 1. 2. A person shall not qualify to be appointed as a member of the Commission if any of the disabilities mentioned in Section 215(2) applies in his or her case. 3. In addition to the disqualifications under subsection 2, a person shall not be qualified to be appointed a member of the Commission if he or she has benefited from or facilitated an unlawful or irregular allocation, acquisition, or use or change of use of land or other public property, or committed an environmental offense, or actively engaged in an act that degraded or otherwise compromised a natural resource of the Gambia. 4. The provisions of Section 216 shall apply with respect to the removal from office of a member of the Commission. Independence of the Commission. 256. Except as otherwise provided in this Constitution or in any other law which is not inconsistent with this Constitution, the Commission shall not, in the performance of its functions, be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. Part 3. General Provisions, Land Ownership. 257. 1. All land in the Gambia belong to the people of the Gambia collectively as a nation and as communities and as individuals. 2. Land tenure in the Gambia is based on freehold, leasehold, and customary land tenure unless otherwise determined by an act of the National Assembly. Land holding by non-citizens. 258. 1. No interest in or right over land in the Gambia shall be created which vests in a person who is not a citizen of the Gambia a freehold interest in any land in the Gambia. 2. If, whether before or after the coming into force of this Constitution, a person who is not a citizen of the Gambia holds a freehold title in any land in the Gambia, that freehold title shall be deemed to have been converted into a leasehold interest for a period of 30 years upon the date of the coming into force of this Constitution. 3. Any person who is not a citizen of the Gambia may acquire and hold land on the basis of leasehold tenure only, and any such leasehold, however granted, shall not exceed 30 years. 4. If, whether before or after the coming into force of this Constitution, any agreement, deed, conveyance, or document of whatever nature confers or purports to confer on a person who is not a citizen of the Gambia an interest in land greater than a 30-year lease, the provision shall be deemed as conferring on the person a 30-year leasehold interest. 5. Any person not being a citizen of the Gambia who holds a leasehold property shall not in any manner dispose of the property unless the property is disposed to a person who a. is a citizen of the Gambia, or b. is not a citizen of the Gambia with the approval of Cabinet to acquire and hold the property for the remainder of the term of the leasehold. 6. Where a person who is not a citizen of the Gambia holds a leasehold interest in land to be used for a specified project or specified purpose, the land shall a. not be converted for use for another purpose, and b. revert to the state if it is no longer used for the specified project or purpose. 7. The state may, on the basis of reciprocity, convey to a foreign government land to be used perpetually for its diplomatic activities, and such land, a. shall not be transferred or otherwise conveyed to any other person or authority or used for any other purpose except with the express consent of the government, and b. may revert to the state in the event of a cessation of diplomatic relations. 8. Subject to subsection 7, where a leasehold held by a person who is not a citizen of the Gambia comes to an end, the leasehold property may be renewed for such further period of up to 30 years at a time, but not exceeding in aggregate 90 years. 9. For purposes of this section, a body corporate shall be regarded as a citizen only if the body corporate is wholly owned by one or more citizens of the Gambia. B. Property held in trust shall be regarded as being held by a citizen of the Gambia only if all the beneficial interest of the trust is held by persons who are citizens of the Gambia. Chapter 15. The Public Services. Part 1. The Public Services of the Gambia. The Public Services of the Gambia. 259. 1. The public service of the Gambia includes the following: A. The Civil Service. B. The Judicial Service. C. The National Assembly Service. D. Local Government Service. E. The National Security Service. F. The Education Service. G. The Health Service. H. The statutory bodies and state-owned enterprises. And I. Any such public service as may be established by an act of the National Assembly. Offices in the Public Service. 261. An office in the public service includes all offices, the emoluments of which are payable out of any public fund of the Gambia. 2. Subject to Section 22(3), the reference in this Constitution to an office in the public service does not include A. The offices of President, Vice President, Speaker or Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Minister or a member of the National Assembly. B. The offices of a member of any commission, opening brackets, other than a commission, the members of which are hereby or by an act of the National Assembly declared to hold an office in the public service, brackets closed, or a member of the Advisory Committee on the exercise of the prerogative of mercy, or the Advisory Committee on the conferment of honors. Appointment to and removal from offices in the public services. 261. 1. Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, A. The President may act in accordance with the advice of the Public Service Commission, the Teachers Service Commission, or the Health Service Commission, as the case may be, appoint persons to hold or act in any office in the public service of the Gambia of the rank of permanent secretary or head of an institution in the public service, including approval of appointments, the exercise of disciplinary control over such persons, and their removal from office. And B. The Public Service Commission, the Teachers Service Commission, or the Health Service Commission, as the case may be, may appoint persons to hold or act in any office in the public service of the Gambia other than those referred to in paragraph A, including the approval of their appointments and the exercise of disciplinary control over such persons and their removal from office. 2. Except with the consent of the President or Vice President, no person shall be appointed under this section to act in any office on the personal staff of the President or Vice President. 3. In this Constitution, A. Power to appoint any person to hold or to act in any office in the public service shall include the power to confirm appointments, to exercise disciplinary control over, and, subject to Section 265, to remove persons holding or acting in such offices, and to reappoint or reinstate any person appointed in exercise of the power in question, unless such power is expressly or by necessary implication vested in some other person or authority. B. Power to remove an officer in the public service shall include power to require such officer to retire from the public service. C. Nothing in paragraph B shall be construed as conferring on any person or authority the power to require a judge of a superior court, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Commissioners of the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission, National Human Rights Commission and the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Auditor General, the Governor of the Central Bank of the Gambia, or the Ombudsman, or a Deputy Ombudsman to retire from the public service. And D. Any provision which vests in any person or authority power to remove a person from any public office shall be without prejudice to the power of any person or authority to abolish any office or to any law for the compulsory retirement of public officers. Secretary General and Head of the Civil Service, 262(1). There shall be a Secretary General who shall a. be the head of the civil service, and b. be appointed by the President acting on the advice of the Public Service Commission and subject to confirmation by the National Assembly. 2. The functions of the Secretary General are as follows. A. Advising the President on matters relating to the public service. B. Ensuring that the public service is efficient and effective. C. Coordinating and supervising the activities and work of permanent secretaries. D. Coordinating the policies and programs of the public service. E. Serving as a link between cabinet and the public service. F. Serving as a link between service commissions. G. Ensuring the implementation of cabinet and other government decisions. And H. Performing any other duties relating to the public service assigned to him or her from time to time by the President. Qualifications, disqualifications, and tenure of the Secretary General. 263. 1. A person is qualified to be appointed Secretary General if he or she has a. has a university degree or equivalent professional qualification, b. has experience in public service affairs at a senior managerial level for a period of not less than 15 years, c. is qualified to be appointed as permanent secretary, and d. is a person of high moral character and proven integrity. 2. A person shall not qualify to be appointed as Secretary General if he or she a. has been declared to be of unsound mind, b. is a member of the National Assembly or any other elective office, c. has during any period of service in public office or in the private sector been terminated or dismissed for dishonesty or immoral conduct, d. is or has at any time during the 5 years immediately preceding his or her appointment been nominated as a candidate for election as a member of the National Assembly or any other political office. E. Is or has at any time during such period of 5 years been the holder of any office in any organization that sponsors or otherwise supports or has at any time sponsored or otherwise supported a candidate for election as a member of the National Assembly or of any local government authority, or he or she has actively identified himself or herself with any such organization, or F. has been convicted in any country of an offense for which he or she has been sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 6 months or more and has not received a pardon. 3. The Secretary General shall not, in the performance of his or her functions, be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority, but shall, in the performance of such functions, have due regard to the policies and programs of the government. Permanent Secretaries. 264(1). Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, a ministry or department of the government of the Gambia shall be under the administrative supervision of a permanent secretary, whose office shall be an office in the public service. 2. A permanent secretary shall be appointed by the President acting in accordance with the advice of the Public Service Commission, subject to confirmation by the National Assembly. 3. The functions of a permanent secretary shall include a. Organization and operation of the ministry or department, b. advising the responsible minister in respect of the business of the ministry, its departments and agencies, c. implementation of the policies of the government of the Gambia, and d. responsibility for the proper expenditure of public funds by or in connection with the ministry or department. Protection of public officers. 265. No public officer shall a. be victimized or discriminated against, either directly or indirectly, for having discharged his or her duties faithfully and according to law, or B, be removed from office or reduced in rank or otherwise punished without due process of law. Restriction on political activities of public officers. 266. 1. A person holding an office in the public service shall not A. hold office in any political party, or B. openly participate in any political activity. 2. Any person who holds an office in the public service who wishes to contest an election for political office shall, prior to nomination as a candidate, obtain 1 year's leave of absence without pay, which leave shall not unreasonably be refused. 3. If a person has obtained leave of absence in accordance with this section, is elected to a political office, he or she shall immediately resign or, if applicable, retire from his or her office in the public service, and if he or she fails to do so, his or her services will be terminated. Retirement age. 267. Save as provided in this Constitution, a person holding an office in the public service, A, shall retire from office on attaining the age of 60 years or such other age as may be prescribed by an act of the National Assembly, in brackets, which age is referred to as the compulsory retirement age, and B, may retire with an earned pension at any time after attaining the age of 45 years or such other age as may be prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. Pensions. 268. 1. A public officer shall, on retirement, receive such pensions as is commensurate with his or her rank, salary, and length of service. 2. The pension payable to any person shall be exempt from tax and shall be subject to periodic review to take account of changes in the value of money. 3. The payment of pensions shall be prompt and regular and easily accessible to pensioners. Protection of pension rights. 269. 1. The law applicable to any benefits to which this section applies shall, in relation to any person who has been granted or who is eligible to be granted such benefits, be that in force on the relevant date or any later date that is not less favorable to that person. 2. Where any person is entitled to exercise an option as to which of two or more laws shall apply in his or her case, the law specified by him or her in exercising the option shall, for the purpose of this section, be deemed to be more favorable to him or her than the other law or laws. 3. Any benefit to which this section applies, opening brackets, not being a benefit that is a charge on some other fund of the Gambia, closing brackets, shall be a charge on the Consolidated Revenue Fund or upon such other special fund, whether contributory or non-contributory, as may be prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. 4. This section applies to any benefits payable under any law providing for the grant of pensions, gratuities, or compensations to persons who are or have been public officers in respect of their service in the public service, or to the widows, children, dependents, or personal representatives of such persons in respect of such service. 5. Reference to the law applicable to any benefits to which this section applies includes references to any law relating to the time at and the manner in which any person may retire in order to become eligible for those benefits. 6. In this section, the relevant date means A. In relation to benefits granted before 18th February 1965, the date on which those benefits were granted. B. In relation to any benefits granted on or after 18th February 1965, or in respect of any person who was a public officer before that date, the 18th February 1965. C. In relation to any benefits granted or to be granted to or in respect of any person who became or becomes a public officer on or after 18th February 1965, the date on which he or she became or becomes a public officer. Part 2. Service Commissions. 1. General Provisions. Establishment, composition, and general functions of service commissions. 271. There is established the following service commissions under the civil service. A. Public Service Commission. B. Teachers Service Commission. And C. Health Service Commission. 2. Each commission established under subsection 1 shall A. Comprise a chairperson and 4 other members who shall be appointed by the President, subject to confirmation by the National Assembly, and B. Have responsibility for the establishment of offices and appointment to such offices in the civil service, including exercising disciplinary control and removing persons holding those offices. 1. In the case of the Public Service Commission, as it relates to offices other than those relating to the education and health service sectors. 2. In the case of the Teachers Service Commission, as it relates to offices in the education sector only. And 3. In the case of the Health Service Commission, as it relates to offices in the health service sector only. Secretariat of the Service Commissions. 271. The office in the civil service with responsibility for personnel matters shall A. Serve as a secretariat for each of the service commissions established under sections 271 and 291. B. Designate personnel to attend and provide guidance to each service commission in order to ensure a proper streamlining of the work of the service commissions, and C. Provide such support as may be necessary to ensure that the service commissions function efficiently and effectively. 2. Public Service Commission. Powers and functions of the Public Service Commission. 272. 1. The Public Service Commission shall A. Promote the values and principles of public service mentioned in Part 1 and Chapter 2. B. Investigate, monitor, and evaluate the organization, administration, and personnel practices of the public service. C. Ensure that the public service is efficient and effective. D. Develop human resources in the public service. E. Afford adequate, equal, and impartial opportunities for appointment, training, and advancement at all levels of the public service for which it has responsibility, without distinction as to ethnicity, gender, or class. F. Review and make recommendations to the government in respect of conditions of service, codes of conduct, and qualifications of officers in the public service. G. Evaluate and report to the President and the National Assembly on the extent to which the values and principles mentioned in Part 1 and Chapter 2 are complied with in the public service. And H. Perform any other functions and exercise any other powers conferred by an act of the National Assembly. 2. The performance of functions or exercise of powers by the Public Service Commission under subsection 1 and section 270(2)(b)(1) shall not apply to any of the following offices. A. An office of High Commissioner, Ambassador, or other diplomatic or consular representative of the Gambia. B. An office or position subject to 1. The National Assembly Service Commission. 2. The Judicial Service Commission. 3. The Security Services Commission. 4. The Armed Forces. And 5. An office in the service of a local government. 3. Teachers Service Commission. Powers and functions of the Teachers Service Commission. 273. 1. The Teachers Service Commission shall A. Promote the values and principles of public service mentioned in Part 1 and Chapter 2. B. Investigate, monitor, and evaluate the organization, administration, and personnel practices of the public service in the field of education. C. Ensure that the public service is efficient and effective in relation to education. D. Liaise with relevant institutions and authorities with respect to the development of education curricula. E. Develop human resources in the education sector to ensure the delivery of quality education. F. Afford adequate, equal, and impartial opportunities for appointment, training, and advancement at all levels of the public service for which it has responsibility, without distinction as to ethnicity, gender, or class. G. Ensure the appropriate registration of teachers. H. Assign teachers employed by the Commission for service in any public school or institution. I. Review and make recommendations to the government in respect of conditions of service, codes of conduct, and qualifications of officers in the field of education. J. Evaluate and report to the President and the National Assembly on the extent to which the values and principles mentioned in Part 1 and Chapter 2 are complied with in the education sector. And K. Perform such other functions as may be prescribed by this Constitution or an Act of the National Assembly. 2. The Commission shall, in addition to the functions outlined in subsection 1, A. Review the standards of education and training of persons entering the teaching service. B. Review the demand for and the supply of teachers. And C. Advise the government on matters relating to the teaching profession. 3. Health Service Commission. Powers and functions of the Health Service Commission. 274. The Health Service Commission shall A. Promote the values and principles of public service mentioned in Part 1 and Chapter 2. B. Investigate, monitor, and evaluate the organization, administration, and personnel practices of the public service in the field of health and healthcare delivery. C. Ensure that the public service is efficient and effective in relation to the delivery of healthcare to all the communities in the Gambia. D. Develop human resources in the health sector to ensure the delivery of quality healthcare. E. Afford adequate, equal, and impartial opportunities for appointment, training, and advancement at all levels of the public service for which it has responsibility, without distinction as to ethnicity, gender, or class. F. Assign medical officers and health care personnel by the Commission for service in any public health facility or area in the Gambia. G. Review and make recommendations to the government in respect of conditions of service, codes of conduct, and qualification of officers in the field of health and healthcare delivery. H. Evaluate and report to the President and the National Assembly on the extent to which the values and principles mentioned in Part 1 and Chapter 2 are complied with in the health sector, and I. Perform such other functions as may be prescribed by this Constitution or an Act of the National Assembly. Part 3. General Provisions on Service Commissions, Qualifications, Disqualifications, and Tenure of Members of Service Commissions. 275(1). A member of a service commission shall be a person who A. is a citizen of the Gambia, B. is fit and proper with knowledge of or experience in administration, management, or the provision of services in the respective areas of responsibility of the Commission, and C. is of high moral character and proven integrity. 2. A person shall not be qualified to be appointed a member of a service commission if he or she A. is a member of the public service or a member of a disciplined force. B, is a member of the National Assembly or any other elective office. C, is a member of the governing body, a statutory body, or state-owned enterprise. D, is an office holder in or member of the executive body of a political party. E, has within the 2 years preceding his or her appointment been nominated as a candidate in an election to the National Assembly. F, has been convicted in any country of an offense for which he or she has been sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 6 months or more and has not received a pardon. Or G, is otherwise disqualified from holding an office in the public service. 3. A member of a service commission shall be disqualified for appointment to any office in the public service during a period of 3 years after he or she ceases to be a member of the service commission. 4. Subject to subsection 5, the members of a service commission shall be appointed for a term of 5 years, subject to renewal for 1 more term. 5. The provisions of section 216 shall apply with respect to the removal from office of a member of a service commission. Additional powers and independence of service commissions. 276. 1. A service commission may delegate in writing and with or without conditions any of its functions and powers under this section to any one or more of its members or to an officer, body, or authority in the public service. 2. A service commission A may make regulations for the performance of its functions. B, shall prescribe a code of conduct for public officers within its jurisdiction, and C, shall prepare and submit an annual report on the performance of its functions to the National Assembly. 3. In the exercise of its powers and the performance of its functions, a service commission shall be independent and shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority, except that it shall take into account government policy relating to the public service, including the education and health sectors. Part 4. State-owned enterprises. Appointment, qualifications, disqualifications, and removal of board members of state-owned enterprises. 277. 1. The members of the board of directors or other governing body of a state-owned enterprise shall be appointed by the President after consultation with the Public Service Commission. 2. A member of a board of directors of a state-owned enterprise shall be a person who is A citizen of the Gambia, B, is fit and proper with knowledge of or experience in corporate governance, administration, management, law, or expertise in the subject matter under the responsibility of the state-owned enterprise, and C, is of high moral character and proven integrity. 3. A person shall not be qualified to be appointed a member of a board of directors or other governing body of a state-owned enterprise if he or she, A, unless an ex officio member, is a member of the public service or a member of a disciplined force, B, is a member of the National Assembly or any other elective office, C, is a member of the governing body of another statutory body or state-owned enterprise, D, is an office holder in or a member of the executive body of a political party, E, has been convicted in any country of an offense for which he or she has been sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 6 months or more and has not received a pardon, or F, is otherwise disqualified from holding an office in the public service. 4. The provisions of section 216 shall apply with respect to the removal from office of a member of a service commission. Chief Executive Officer. 278. The Chief Executive Officer of a state-owned enterprise shall be appointed by the Board of Directors through an open and transparent competitive process following advertisement of the position and subject to the approval of the National Assembly. Qualifications, disqualifications, and removal of Chief Executive Officer 279(1). In addition to any qualifications in the law or other governing instrument establishing a state-owned enterprise, the Chief Executive Officer of a state-owned enterprise shall A. be a citizen of the Gambia, B. be fit and proper with a minimum of a university degree or an equivalent professional qualification, and at least 10 years post-qualification experience in a relevant field of study, and C. be a person of high moral character and proven integrity. 2. The qualifications for a member of a board of directors outlined in section 277(3) apply in relation to the office of a chief executive officer of a state-owned enterprise. 3. A chief executive officer shall not hold any other public office or other remunerative office. 4. The board of directors of a state-owned enterprise may remove a chief executive officer only, A. for inability to perform the functions of his or her office, whether arising from infirmity of mind or body or from any other cause. B. For misbehavior. C. For misconduct, whether in the performance of the member's function or otherwise. D. For violation of this Constitution or any other law. E. For incompetence. F. For bankruptcy or entering into an agreement with creditors, or G. If any circumstances arise which would have disqualified him or her from appointment to the office. Monitoring body 280. Within 6 months of the coming into force of this Constitution, an Act of the National Assembly shall establish a body to monitor the operations of state-owned enterprises and shall prescribe the manner in which such enterprises shall A. be accountable to the National Assembly, and B. conduct their affairs in order to promote efficiency, transparency, and probity in all their undertakings. Reporting 281. 1. A state-owned enterprise shall, within 3 months of the end of its financial year, submit an annual report to the National Assembly on its business and operations during the preceding year. 2. The appropriate committee of the National Assembly may extend the time for the submission of a report required under subsection 1.